I think for me, and to the other question about the friction between creative teams and strategy is useful when it provides a clear guidance. And that guidance is normally going to be holistic, and it's going to need to be tied to a business challenge. So whatever you call yourself, a brand strategist, creative strategist, data strategist, I literally don't care. I think what I want is someone who's inquisitive enough to figure out the solutions that are needed to solve a business challenge and is able to break those down in a way where creatives can stand on top of them and build useful solutions. We always said strategy is the voice of the consumer in an agency. Creatives are the voice of possibility. Creatives left to their own devices will build some of the most wonderful things on the face of the earth. Most of them will not sell product. Apologies to any creatives who are listening. And then strategists left to their own devices will come up with the most logically boring solution, but it will probably do what it needs to, but my God, it will be boring to watch.
Welcome to Punchy by Rival, where we take the gloves off to share the hard-hitting realities of the challenger marketing world. Each week, we answer your burning questions, cut through the BS, and tell you what you need to know about the world of marketing to grow your brand, business, and career. All right, up and running with another episode of Punchy. And actually, I think this is going to be our last one before the summer break. It's either this one or one more, but very excited to have Elijah May here with us today. Elijah is a serial entrepreneur who has co-founded Funded House, Team CMO, and The Experience Film. He draws on a ton of experience working as a marketing strategist and also has his own podcast called The CMO Show, which everybody should go check out. Elijah, thank you for joining us from hot Austin today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you. For the record, The Experience Firm, The Experience Film would be a different company that I'm now thinking about, but we'll leave that alone for now.
Experience Firm. Thank you. My bad.
Nope.
All right, let's get into it. So we got 3 questions and then rants and raves for today. We're going to start with the question focused a little bit more on the startups of the world. So the question is, I'm a startup founder / CEO and have no idea about marketing. Who should I hire first? A mid-level growth marketer, a more senior CMO, entry-level person? What am I looking for? How do I know when I found the right person? Elijah, if you wouldn't mind, going to start with you.
Oh my goodness. I kind of think those are all wrong answers. I think what you need is a brand marketer first and foremost. So I also run an accelerator program for new companies. And the majority of the time, the thing that I see that makes life so much more difficult than it needs to be is a total lack of clarity, right? Just about the value proposition. And so the very first thing you need to do is to sit down with somebody who can help you figure out, like, this is exactly what we're offering and who we're offering it to. If I had to pick one of those 3, I would say a CMO, somebody more senior who understands the bigger picture.
And is that something that you would, because I think you'd find that we largely agree, you need to figure out what's the story you want to tell, clarity on your positioning, point of differentiation, all that. But that's something you would recommend as a full-time hire versus maybe hiring a consultant or an agency to come in and help you out with that?
No, I think a consultant's probably a better bet. I'm talking to an entrepreneur right now that if we do this deal, will be probably the biggest thing we've ever done, and that's exactly what we're starting with. Is this question of, how do we position this for the market? Because when we push, we need to push hard and go big. And we don't really get another big bite of the apple.
Okay, cool. Jenna, what are your thoughts on what the first hire for a startup should be on the marketing team?
I don't know. Maybe I'm biased because I'm coming from like an executional background, but I actually would lean more towards like a mid-level, like marketing, like somebody who's going to be like hands on keyboard. I guess maybe, this is a little bit different and it is going to be like talent dependent, where I think that potentially somebody at a CMO level who wants to join a startup may be joining with the expectation that they may have to be, I hate this phrase, hands on keyboard and have to put stuff out. But I think that the right mid-level marketer, I think especially early, can help with, I don't know that a lot of startups really should have a 100% clearly defined, this is our story. You should be clear on, all right, here's our base proposition. Here's kind of where we see our point of difference in the market. And I know that that's, what we focus on a lot. But especially really, really early days when you're actually still trying to figure out what that story is, you need somebody that's going to go help you be a little bit flexible and like test different propositions like out in market and help kind of guide that process of like, like DuBose talks about this of like how, brands are not just like the decisions that are made like in the boardroom, like they're also like the collection of perceptions that other people have about your brand. And I think a mid-level person who is actually going to be like, helping you like execute and run campaigns or put stuff like actually in the market is going to help a little bit more on some of like that user feedback. I think it's definitely hard to find somebody at that mid-level that also has the big picture of, all right, my testing and like my propositions need to arrive at clarification of that story. But I think you get a little bit more along the way. And that, especially like if you're going to bring in like a consultant that's going to help with with that kind of brand story, I'm always going to lean towards a doer first and foremost, like in a startup.
DuBose?
I think it's funny. It's a bit like a football or soccer team, right? Like, who do you bring in to kind of make the team stronger? And I think one of the things that's there is if you've just been promoted up into a new league, it's similar to kind of trying to launch a startup without talent that's commensurate to the market. And I'd imagine it's much easier to get someone to play down to specific bits than it is to get someone to play up. And I think that's probably why we've sat on the average of, okay, the middle, because you can get someone who's competent enough to do it, but can probably play above themselves. I think it's got to be either a mid-level person or a senior person who understands that they need to be an all-rounder and be a decent holding midfielder, for lack of a better term on the metaphor. And I think, there's that idea that a lot of it's going to be mindset, not just skill, because I think someone who's happy to throw in, who's happy to understand execution, but also where it's going, it's going to be invaluable in that, because you can build the rest of a team around them. And I think the question then becomes, is it a mid-level talent who's very good on execution, but who's going to be able to over-index a bit on understanding the vision of where we're pushing to and helping to set that? Or is it the senior person who's going to over-index on vision, but is going to need to have enough executional background and knowledge that they can start to make that a reality? And I think that's the question. It'll change for every business. But I think, to Jenna's point, I think setting an initial hypothesis of what you think the value proposition, the brand, and the direction of the company should be is going to be integral. But then being able to adapt and test that as you go is going to be the thing that then increases the probability of success. So no easy answer on this, but I think the one we can knock out is you probably don't get kids out of the youth academy and then throw them into the World Cup.
You live in New York now, DuBose. I'm going to start doing the American football metaphors. Also because 60 days until kickoff. And Elijah, we have a little bit of a rivalry going over here with our fantasy football league that
it's not a rivalry. It's not a rivalry. I've stomped you both 3 years in a row. It's a rivalry in the sense that I have a rivalry.
All right. I think I can mute people as the host, can I? Okay. All right. So the only thing I would add on top of what everybody said is I feel like what's really important on top of kind of figuring out what level and what role and all that stuff is that you get somebody that has startup experience, because as we all know, if you've worked in a startup, it is a completely different beast. And for marketing, and I would probably argue any role, you need someone that is comfortable and understands the pace and kind of the controlled chaos best sometimes of how a startup needs to operate. Let's move on. So the next question, I put a +1 next to this question. DuBose put is that a plus $1 million or 10 million? I can't count all the zeros.
It's 100,000.
It's 100,000. No, it's more than that. Anyway, DuBose is very excited to speak to this topic, which is, I recently joined an ad agency as a strategist. Why does the creative team hate the strategist, or is it just me? And how can I reduce the friction between the two? So DuBose, why don't we start with the definition for people who haven't had the joy of working in and amongst strategy and creative teams at big agencies? What is a brand strategist? What is a creative or a creative strategist? And how do you manage the dynamics there?
God, those are all good questions. So I'll be honest, I've worked in strategy for 15 years now, a little over that. I have no idea what the difference between a brand strategist and a creative strategist is. I know generally that we've added about 10 more labels on these things just because A, you've got to have goals for people on your team, and B, everyone likes to have a specialism. At my last agency where I had a strategy team at VaynerMedia, I fought tooth and nail to not have distinctions between brand strategist, creative strategist, comm strategist, media strategist, data strategist, because I thought it takes away the responsibility of being a strategist that solves a problem. I do understand and have found over the years that it's helpful to have a focus and a label and a specialism. I think brand strategy, for all intents and purposes, and how it used to be described at every agency I was at, were the ethereal big thinkers that got to go to lunch and then talk about the wonderful things a brand should stand for. And then creative and media strategists were the ones that had to go, well, that's a wonderful thought. Now let's make a brief out of it. So I think, there were some helpful things there and some unhelpful things there. I think for me, and to the other question about the friction between creative teams and strategy is useful when it provides a clear guidance. And that guidance is normally going to be holistic, and it's going to need to be tied to a business challenge. So whatever you call yourself, a brand strategist, creative strategist, data strategist, I literally don't care. I think what I want is someone who's inquisitive enough to figure out the solutions that are needed to solve a business challenge and is able to break those down in a way where creatives can stand on top of them and build useful solutions. We always said strategy is the voice of the consumer in an agency. Creatives are the voice of possibility. Creatives left to their own devices will build some of the most wonderful things on the face of the earth. Most of them will not sell product. Apologies to any creatives who are listening. And then strategists, left to their own devices, will come up with the most logically boring solution, but it will probably do what it needs to, but my God, it will be boring to watch. And I think, the combination of the two is where you get something that goes beyond the obvious, just what consumers have asked for, the Homer Simpson's built a car himself kind of thing. And you get a nice creative leap and flair there. So when that works, it's a wonderfully generative relationship. When it doesn't, I think you see both parties not seeing the value of the other one. The last thing I would say on this is don't mistake a good relationship between strategy and creative as a frictionless relationship. There's good friction and there's bad friction. You should have creatives to be able to tell you, as I've gotten many a time, that this brief is bullshit and you should go back and figure it out. Just like you should, as a strategist, be able to rather openly look at work sometimes and go, this has not hit the mark for where we need it to. I think respect is the important thing, but friction you're never going to remove because good work comes from respectful friction.
Elijah, what about you? In your experience, whether it's within agencies or just in general, kind of like DuBose said, you need both of those dynamics at the table of thinking through the voice and the needs of the customer and then being able to bring it to life in a creative way. How do you think about managing that?
I have so many thoughts on this, you're going to have to cut me off, but let me start here. I was in violent agreement with Mr. DuBose here for like 30, 45 seconds there. And then he said that strategists are boring and now I want to fight it. I think I wrote a LinkedIn post about this. I said, about strategy, and I used that, that meme. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. And I think that the vast majority of people, everybody likes to label themselves a strategist. So I love to ask people, like, what's your thing? How do you identify yourself? Like, what do you think you're strongest at? And strategy is by far the number one answer that I get. And I would say that it is true maybe 10% of the time. Like, everybody likes to think of themselves as a strategist. I don't even think they understand what that word means. I think it's super simple. And I do agree with your sort of, if you're not bringing solutions to problems, then you're not a strategist, right? If you're not understanding the problem and breaking down the problem and putting together a plan for solving the problem, then you're just somebody who likes to throw ideas at the wall. And that's great. I love ideas, but that's not strategy. And I think that if we could get over that little hurdle right there, which is a pretty big hurdle, that a lot of the conversations would be, we'll just say, shorter.
I love it. Jenna, thoughts from you? Sitting more in the media department within agencies, you have a front row seat to some of the healthy and sometimes unhealthy tension between creative and strategy teams. Any thoughts from you?
Okay, so we have this on the media team, except for us, it's media planners and media buyers. It's the exact same cats and dogs as creatives and like strategists, the same thing. Like I said, I definitely agree with DuBose and Elijah on this one. But yeah, like I think what Elijah said is really interesting is that everybody wants to think of themselves as a strategist. And so what I've like managed, I've been on both sides. I've been a planner and I've been a buyer. And what I've had the most success with and like what I've told like my teams and like my juniors is that like, yes, everybody wants to think that they're a strategist. And so your job is to make them feel strategic, even though you are the strategist. And so, like I said, like, especially like some of this is, especially in media, you are never probably necessarily going to be the particular expert in buying, right? Like I said, like this is the analogy for us. And again, you're not going to be a designer or an art director or whatever else. And so it's typically less about being like, all right, I have a problem as the planner or the strategist with like the technical specifics of what you proposed or the design or whatever else. But yeah, being like, hey, I think that this isn't quite solving the problem like as I've articulated it. And that does require that you have enough technical knowledge or enough like specialist knowledge to be able to have an intelligent conversation with the people on the other side of the table, like as you have to know enough to be dangerous, right? Like, so in my world, that's like, you do have to understand bidding and buying mechanisms and campaign structures. And probably as a good strategist, you have to have at least a rudimentary eye for design and creative, like, and a couple other things to be able to, again, have an articulate conversation with somebody else while still being able to concede that they are the particular expert in their area. And a lot of it comes down to, again, like, you know, the interpersonal dynamics of like how you want to like manage that relationship and do it. But you do have to make people feel like they have room to be strategic in their area of specialty, and you respect that and you respect that capability. But it's just a little bit different, that you guys are doing different jobs a little bit, and helping, I think, understand those roles is really good. And also to remind everyone that the real enemy is account services.
They keep us divided so that we don't fight the account services.
Exactly.
It's one of their gifts.
Exactly. It is. Yes.
Don't trust what they say.
The real enemy is account. Remember that. Remember that. Or actually, like, if you really want to be nice, the real enemy is the client. Yeah.
Not going to take the bait on that one. All right, let's move on to our third topic of the day. So obviously, every marketing podcast, every blog, everybody is talking about AI. One of the angles that's important within AI is there's so many marketers, even some big brands, that are now producing campaigns, distributing content that's been AI generated. What about the legal liability of this and the rights to the assets and images that are generated by AI? What do we have to think about? What do we have to worry about as marketers at this stage in the evolution of this technology? Jenna, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah. So, actually, so, you know, and DuBose, brought this up, before the show that, apparently, like I said, that there are, Adobe, and I won't steal DuBose's thunder on this one. I'll let him do it. But, Adobe has offered kind of indemnification, against anything like generated within their platform like this. I don't know yet, and I'm obviously not a lawyer, which is the important preface to all of this of, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, and you should definitely seek real legal advice from your actual in-house counsel. But it doesn't yet seem to be that like marketers or brands are quite yet at the risk threshold for what will absolutely be groundbreaking like legal action regarding the nature of copyright, which is definitely going to change like over the next like couple years. But that doesn't mean that that's not going to change in a little while. Like, this is, I think, the closest, analog that I have is, changes in privacy regulation, because I think, what's happened to privacy regulation with, the GDPR and other really landmark pieces of legislation is absolutely what's about to happen to copyright law. But the folks that were on the first line of the legislative and regulatory action of those changes were like the tech platforms themselves. And we've all seen the headlines. I think like Sarah Silverman was the most recent one. I think that she's filed suit against ChatGPT. I know, like I said, there's a lot of pending regulatory action regarding for large language models, specifically around kind of copyrighted and other private data used in the training of those things. Which is a little bit different than generative AI. And so I guess, like I say, of course, consulting with your counsel, I don't think that this is yet, like I say, like a huge risk. It does sound like, and DuBose can articulate on this like a little bit more. It's like, hey, see if you can go find the places where there is some indemnification, like, available for the use of generative AI. But probably for the next couple years, it feels like you might be able to take advantage of this is a gray space and the wheels of justice turn slowly but grind extremely fine. But you maybe have some time kind of deal as, what I think the current situation is.
Elijah, I'd be curious in either the work you do or, I know you spend a lot of time with kind of the network of CMOs that you built in the podcast. How or if, has this topic come up in those conversations?
So we were literally just having this conversation in the other room. We're having the CMO breakfast here. And It's Wild Wild West. We all know that. I'd like to refer to a case study here. I can't remember the exact name of the company, but basically there's a guy who got really good at getting people out of tickets. And then he realized that AI could do it even better. And so he basically said, I'm going to send you to court. I'm going to have an AI, I'm going to have a microphone. I'm going to AI listen to everything that's said, and it's going to tell you what to say back to the judge to get you out of your speeding ticket or whatever it was. And it was so effective that he got sued by different bar associations, right? And the only way they could find to sue him was the suit they brought was for practicing law without a license. And my favorite quote of probably the last 2 months was, they said, this is like dinosaurs suing to stop the Stone Age, right? Like, this is happening. This pushback is ridiculous. It's just like, you're better than us and we don't like it, and so we can't stop it, so we're just going to try to slow it down. This whole thing that, like, AI is going to look at our images and then it's going to steal all our images. Like, that's what everybody does. Like, you look at a Picasso if you're learning to become an artist, and then you derive something from Picasso and something from, Van Gogh. Like, that's what we do. That's the process of creativity, is just taking different elements and combining them into new things. The idea that stealing people's work, I really struggle. I mean, I understand why people don't like it, because it's going to put a lot of people out of business, but it's going to put all of us out of business. It's only a matter of time. Right? Some will go sooner than others, but they're predicting global unemployment by like 2060. Right. So I think we should be more focused on, like, let's just, like, this is happening. What do we need to do in a world where this is reality?
DuBose?
I think Elijah raises quite an interesting point. And it's the thing I've been attempting to understand when it comes to generative AI is, the process of any inspiration is to draw in things from the world. I think Roy Sutherland calls creativity the connection between two previously unconnected ideas or concepts. And I really like that. It also implies that pretty much nothing is new and everything is just remixed from different combinations of things in the world. And I think, there is something interesting here about the idea that I don't think AI does anything differently than the creative process that all artists and writers and people do. I do think it does it at a scale that has definitely given people pause. And I think there is a challenge here that there needs to be an incentive and a commercial structure to where people want to create new things. Otherwise, generative AI is wonderful at giving you the obvious answer for a lot of things. If you think it thinks outside of the box, you should ask it to give you an image of a businessman and give you the image of a businesswoman, and then look at every stereotypical social cliche that's been layered on top of that. So I think, there is a thing here about human-generated content is going to need to keep going to push the models further. And I think you look at the writer's strike at the moment, you look at other conversations about where SAG may go in the States and strike. I think there's an interesting thing on what is that commercial model that allows you to license things like your creativity, your image, the things that will be training models, training data for the models that we're going to be using, and how we make a system where there's new input coming into it. I think as far as marketers go, Adobe Firefly was quite interesting. It's offered to cover the legal cost of large organizations that get copyright challenges based on content created on its platform. Also, if you use Firefly, one of the interesting things is they're still watermarking the hell out of everything to go, this was AI generated. So I definitely think that we're in uncharted territory. We're trying to figure it out. I imagine Firefly is going to go more fast and loose. You do something like Midjourney, which, we tend to sneak at least one Midjourney image into every creative presentation, every kind of creds deck. I don't know if anyone's realized yet. But the interesting thing there is if you pay Midjourney, you have commercial use on anything that comes out of it. And that's intriguing, right? Because that is a gold mine of stuff. But I think we haven't figured out what the answer here is yet. I know we're very far off being able to have that answer. I think for the most part, this is going to be solved in the marketplace versus being solved in the courts, as you see people like Getty and others attempting to license or snap up these technologies to go, we could attempt to sue to keep our photos out of this. It's going to be way easier just to get the technology that makes us billions more photos. So, I don't think the dust is settled yet, but it'll be interesting to see how it's solved.
Alrighty, let's move on to Rants and Raves. Jenna, I'm going to start with you. What have you got for this week?
Oh man, wait, I had something for this. Wait, I had
Surprise question, I know.
Oh wait, no, I just forgot. Oh, it was actually like I don't know that it's like either like a rant or a rave. It's a curious. Prime Day this year. No, I don't know. Like genuinely, just like I thought the advertising around Prime Day this year was significantly less than in years past, which I thought was like really fascinating. I did hear like a single radio spot for it. But like I feel like last year, or like, you know, like maybe it was like, you know, the year before, you could, like, Prime Day was everywhere. Like it was on bus wraps, it was on the tube, it was on the subway. Like Prime Day was everywhere. This year, I really didn't see that much about it. And I did actually see a lot more content from other people that was actually about, you know, one, how like bad, like the quote unquote, like deals on Prime Day are, of like the, hey, like, you know, what's going on with like pricing strategies that are, you know, have been, you know, falsely put up and then down. And then also like actually a lot more content around like potential like Prime Day like scams about like, hey, you know, people like using, you know, this like, you know, look out for false shipping notifications, you know, like all those types of things. So I think it's really interesting, you know, to see how that evolves, especially as I think Amazon's like reputation has kind of shifted from like the marketplace where everybody buys stuff to kind of like being like a slightly higher budget Wish, of like a lot of like drop ship like widgets like kind of deal, and now like a really big center for like kind of scams. So I just think it interesting, at least like my anecdotal perception of Prime Day this year not being the kind of like big event where I think that the previous advertising that they've done for it, like the last commercial I remember for it was like this big, like, oh my gosh, isn't Prime Day like magical? Look at all the stuff that you can buy, like this really big, like expansive creative work. And now they've just kind of like lost that association kind of deal. They don't really seem to be pushing it. So I don't know that that's a rant or a rave. It was just my interesting observation. Also, fuck Amazon is, I guess that's my rave. Rant. Yeah.
Right. Ends up on a rant note.
Yeah.
DuBose, how about you?
Jenna kind of took mine because I think happy Prime Day to everyone who celebrates or observes it. I think, you know, generally I tend to agree. I always enjoy Prime Day because I like making bad decisions, and that allows me to make bad commercial decisions at scale. Who doesn't need a robot vacuum cleaner that also mops your rug? But, you know, generally I found this year a bit of a damp squib in that, yeah, there's just not the real excitement that you had before. Where's the magic? Where's the Coca-Cola holidays are coming Christmas ad? There's none of that. There's just some discounted Olipop that I bought, and that's already here, so that's nice. And a few bags of Huel. But I think, you know, if you're gonna have an event and a moment, then make it feel vibey. I think even the interface this year was interesting on it, and that you know, yeah, you had the main image, but like normally there's some lightning deals. Normally there's some excitement. I want to watch these things unfold. I want to go buy a tongue scraper at 45% off. But I had to go hunt these things down myself. And I just think Jeffy B has probably dropped the ball on this one in a way where, you know, I think we need to recapture the magic of Prime Day. And hopefully next year, yeah, a bit like the Who's in Whoville, we can kind of recapture the spirit of Prime Day from the cave up on the mountain where the Grinch took it, and really have a magical time with it. But I think it's going to take, you know, Amazon believing it first and foremost. And I feel like they're just going through the motions at this point. It's more Festivus than Christmas. And I think we gotta turn that around.
Wow. Well done. Yeah. Really took that and ran with it. Elijah, take us home. What do you have to rant or rave about this week?
Well, look, that was pretty good. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. So my wife did buy a robot vacuum cleaner. It's a true story. Look, I think if I'm going to rant about something, I want to piggyback on this, and let's just rant about the stupid things that companies do without any real justification. I think Amazon Prime Day is a perfect example. Like, they made up a holiday, right? Like, why? Because so, like, who makes money? No, all these people who make all this stuff lose money for what reason? Like, just to get people like back to Amazon? Like, I didn't forget about Amazon. And the other thing is that now it's like every other holiday. Like, well, you do it. Now I can get a better deal at Target because Target doesn't want to miss out on some imaginary fucking bullshit that they made up. Like, I just don't understand. So what we saw is, by the way, marketing budgets are down across the board. So what happened is, you know, everybody started pulling their marketing budgets in Q1. And then in Q2, you started to see layoffs because sales are down. And so what's happening is the marketing budgets are going to start coming back because nobody's selling anything and everybody's getting laid off. And none of it's based on any reality. Everyone just, like, their sphincters tightened up and everybody went, oh my God, I might get fired. I should stop marketing. Like, no, that'll definitely, why would that work? Like, I don't understand why companies make the same stupid decisions over and over and over again when anybody can look at the history and look at the data and go, that doesn't work, right? I beg you guys, please, you don't have to, you can tell me later, just somebody show me an influencer campaign that works. Just one. Just show me an influencer campaign where the numbers proved out. I beg of you, because no one has shown me one yet, and I've asked a lot of folks.
Actually, fun story. Dr. Grace Kite and Tom Roach, friends of Rival, just did a speech on this at Cannes. Actually, influencer campaigns can be effective. There is some interesting data on this fact.
Please, someone send me the data.
We'll send it over.
All right.
That'd be interesting.
I'm with you. I was an creator skeptic for a long time. I'm with you, Elijah. I was very unhappy about this fact. But apparently,
Wait, Jenna, you're an influencer? Viren, can we clip that? Can we just clip
skeptic,
that?
influencer.
Jenna says, I'm an influencer.
You influence about influencing?
Yes. That is the clip for this episode. We're going to leave it at that. Elijah,
That's
let's go. Thank you so much for your time. We'll let you get back to your CMO breakfast. Hope to see you again soon. Punchy is a production of Rival. We are a growth consultancy that builds challenger brands, strategies, and capabilities to disrupt categories. If you want to learn more about us, check out wearerival.com. If you want to connect with Jenna, DuBose, or myself, email us at media@wearerival.com or find us on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, share with anyone you think might enjoy it, and leave us a review. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.